Hey folks, Rachel Wilkins here. Welcome to Coffee with Artists. This morning I'm thrilled to be joined by Marsha Wilson. I will just let everybody know we're having a couple of tech issues this morning, so we are just streaming the audio separately to the visual. So if it looks a little off, just bear with us. We're rolling with it, and we're going to still have a great interview. So Marsha, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Rachel.
So for those out there who are not familiar with your beautiful artwork that you have in the background there, can you tell us a little about your medium and your genre?
Sure. The medium is pyrography. Pyrography is wood burning. Pyro meaning fire and graphe meaning writing. It's writing with fire. Everything is burned on the wood except for the gray in that one. That's pencil. I do realism, and I make sure that everything is as lifelike as possible.
So pyrography is, it sounds terrifying, first of all, working with fire. Tell us how that process looks for somebody who may never have seen that take place.
It's a little handheld soldering iron machine. There's actually no flame. Unfortunately, that sounds a lot more cool than it actually is. No, it actually just toasts the board with a heated metal tip.
Wow.
So no open flame, unfortunately.
So no hazards, no.
Okay. I don't set off smoke alarms.
Well, that's good. So what in the world led you to this medium? It's such a unique form of expression. What led you to this path?
I kind of fell into it, literally. We had a wood burner in the closet that wasn't being used. We'd had it for many, many years, and just every time we moved, we put it in a new closet. And the thing that got me started was some wooden crosses. I wanted to decorate them, but I didn't want to paint them. And the wood burner popped into my mind, and I started playing with it, and I loved it. And that was about 12 years ago now.
So you didn't have any artistic influences that were creating this medium? You just went in blindly?
Exactly.
That's quite impressive.
I thought all you could do with it was solid black burn. So I was doing silhouettes and words, typography, and I did that for several years, and then I had the brilliant idea to get on Facebook and look for other pyrographers.
And is there a community of pyrographers?
There is a community of pyrographers on Facebook. There are several groups that are totally dedicated to it, and I actually administer one group with another man, and our group is dedicated to paper pyrography. Wow. Burning on paper.
That sounds like a task and a half to try and burn paper without just blowing it up into flames.
Well, the one with the pencil right behind me over my left shoulder, I guess, is actually burned on paper.
Wow.
The beams of the ceiling, which was a boat that was turned upside down for a barn roof, that is burned on paper.
Wow. So I imagine you've got to have a lot of patience and certainly a good certain amount of skill to be able to know when is too much and when is not enough.
It takes a while to learn that balance. Yes, it does. I burned through the paper on purpose when I first started on paper just to see how long that took. Wow. And I was surprised. It takes a lot longer than you think. Depending on the thickness of the paper.
All right. So tell us where in the world are you? Are you in Houston?
I'm in Waco.
Waco. Okay.
Waco is in the middle between Dallas, Fort Worth, and Austin.
Okay.
So directly in the middle on I-35. And I am in the Gallery 712 on Austin Avenue. This is where my artwork is displayed, and also where my studio is located.
Oh, very nice. That's awesome. So did you? I hear the accent. So did you grow up in Texas? Did you grow up in Waco?
I grew up in Texas.
Okay.
Not in Waco, in a little bitty community called Tintop in Parker County, Texas.
So tell us a little about your beginnings. Were you always creative, or was this somebody in your life that was an influence on you and led you to, want to express yourself like this, or was it a different story for you?
Well, my mother was a crafter. My
Mm.
mother taught me everything she knew about quilting, crochet, embroidery, cross stitch, and she also taught crafts at a retirement home. So every project she wanted to try out with the retired people, she would let me try out at home because at my age, if I could do it, then they were probably going to be capable of doing it as well. So we always had a project going, either a quilt up to be quilted or house shoes making and all kinds of fun stuff with marbles.
So you were exposed to that from an early age then?
Yes, very early age.
And did your mom?
And I've always had some kind of project, whether it was a craft or a home improvement project, or ripping out a garage to make into a bathroom, bedroom, suite. I was willing to tackle anything.
I hear that from so many of our community. It's like we either somebody's an artist and a musician, or they're making home renovations, or they're building something. It's just that yearning and that need to create something, right?
Yes, to be busy.
To be busy
and creative. Yes, and the more creative freedom, the more I liked it. Yeah.
So have you looked back since you started with this pyrography? Is this it? This is your passion. This is your way of expressing yourself.
I told myself I needed to settle down to one thing.
Good advice, self.
I said when I master this, then I'll move on to the next one.
Yep.
And I haven't mastered it yet. It's still challenging. It's still fun. It still makes me excited to start a new piece.
So what would you say are the challenges, other than the obvious, the things that we just talked about with kind of staying on that line between going too far and, not burning the paper? What are some other challenges that come from this type of genre?
Finding the right picture to start with. I start with a photograph and I work from a photograph, learning what will work and what will the finished product will look like before you even get started is one of the biggest challenges, because I don't want to get halfway through and have spent 20 some odd hours on a piece to figure out that it's not working.
Yeah,
I've struggled through on a lot of pieces, and so far I haven't been tempted to actually throw one in the fireplace yet.
Well, that's good. I've heard of artists destroying their work to start over again, but I hope that you do not do that, because those are really beautiful, beautiful pieces back there. So how long does it take you to complete something like that larger piece in the background? So
the large piece is actually Notre Dame. Nice. The picture was in a book in the 1800s. So it was a book illustration. It was not a photograph. And it was mostly done with hatch mark shading. And it took me a month and a half.
Wow. That's a lot of hours.
One of the advantages of pyrography is you don't have to build up layers like an oil painting, and you don't have to wait for it to dry. Once you've burned it, it's burned. So
it's kind of
you don't have to go over and over it.
Right, but it's kind of final at that point, right? You've got that. You can't go back.
It's very final.
At least with paint, you have the ability to kind of correct your mistakes a little. You have a little room to play with, but I imagine that is very final.
Yes, it's very final, and so I make very small marks. That way, if I make a mistake, it's a very small mistake.
Easy to hide.
Yes.
Well, so we talked about some of the challenges. What are some of the benefits that you feel you get from working with this medium?
The uniqueness of it is one of my favorite things about it. Sharing with people and telling them and educating them is one of my favorite advantages to pyrography. I still have people question me all the time, what is that? I've never heard of that. And that makes me excited to share.
What are some of the more interesting reactions that you've had from the public when you do share your work? Any that spring to mind?
They almost inevitably ask me how come the paper doesn't catch on fire.
Well, I was wondering the same thing. And what would your answer be?
Ma'am?
What would be your response?
Well, I explained that it more toasts the paper as opposed to burning the paper. It sounds good to call it wood burning, but it'd be more accurate to call it toasting.
Interesting. Very cool. So those early days, you were obviously very creative. You had your mother as this influence. Was there anybody else around that time, or perhaps as you became an adult, that was a big influence on you creatively? Or would you say that these communities that you've mentioned, perhaps the communities on Facebook, have certainly evolved your professional skills? What would you say has been more of an influence on your career creatively?
Creatively, I've had wonderful influences throughout my life, a person here and a person there. My family has always been a huge support. I have 5 daughters.
5?
And
wow.
And I homeschooled them, so we had art projects all the time, and they were often helping me and running around, and their energy has been feeding me all 25 years of their existence. So it's been a wonderful thing to have so many children.
That is amazing. So 5 girls, one after the other. My goodness. So are any of you girls creative themselves?
Oh, several of them. The oldest daughter is 25 and married with daughters of her own. She makes signs and art projects and loves to call me up and send me pictures and say, Mom, what do you think of this? What do you think of this? And she's learning to freehand. My 4th daughter loves to draw, and she has a whole notebook. She's into drawing in the style of a record-keeping book, like a diary. And she takes a blank book and turns it into a diary book. It's very interesting. And the others are creative in different ways. I have one that loves computers and bookkeeping. And
that's a novel one.
I'll let you know how creative that bookkeeping gets.
Hey, you never know. That's my least favorite thing to do. So. And
then I have another daughter that loves baking and cooking. So
fantastic.
They are all very ingenuitive in their own ways.
It's been kind of a common thread with several of these episodes where a few artists have talked about their mothers and just how impactful they were on them creatively, and just these amazing stories of single moms and just moms in general. And I think that moms really need a special shout out, especially now. So many moms are homeschooling, and you mentioned that was something that you did anyway, regardless of whether it was a pandemic. And I always wonder, just as somebody who is not a parent and struggles to sometimes just deal with what life throws at her, how in the world did you homeschool 5 children and then still be able to be creative? Like, it's some kind of superpower, surely.
It kept me sane. Really
okay.
Did. My favorite time of the day was when they were all safe and in bed, and I had a couple of hours to myself to stay up late and do my projects. That was my favorite time of the day. But one of the biggest things that helped us was actually getting rid of our television. And that may sound strange, but we found out how much of a waste of time it really was. And we the hours of the day just seemed to expand, and then we could fill it with projects and get more work done.
Wow. Is that still something that you do today? Do you have a television in your home today?
I don't have a television, but I do watch Netflix on a computer screen.
That's awesome.
And I only have one daughter at home. The rest are out in the world. And what I do is I put on a movie or a documentary on Netflix, and then I'd work on my burning.
Okay.
So, especially since we're working at home. I'm not here at the studio right now. I work at home.
So how are you navigating this new normal with the pandemic? Do you feel, I mean, how is it in Waco? I mean, I'm on the East Coast, so things probably look very different in terms of where we're at with, the ferocity. How's it look out there right now?
Well, I keep up with my friends through Facebook and try to text them and ask them how they're doing. And do you need anything? Have you found this? Can you find that for me? It's a network, and I've tried to keep up with as many artist friends as I can. And there's panic. There's people that are panicking, and then there are people that are trying very, very hard not to panic. And the governor here in Texas is talking about how to possibly start businesses opening back up, if possible, at least adding to the categories of essential businesses. And I think that's going to help a lot. I know stuck at home, I was okay for the first couple of weeks, and then it started wearing really, really thin, and I started getting lonely and depressed and aggravated and angry, and then, So it's been an adventure. It really has.
It's definitely made us all rethink a few things, I think. It's so unprecedented. So not anything any of us really could foresee. And, I have, heard a couple of artists say, well, honestly, it doesn't really feel that much different for me because I am somebody that spends a lot of time in the studio or alone, that kind of artist personality where, you do isolate and you do your best work when you're creating. But I think, for many of us, we thrive with that social interaction and, the getting out and showing our work and having that validation. Are you missing the shows?
I'm missing my studio. My studio is in an open room with other artists and other businesses and people coming and going. And you never know who's going to show up. And you never know who's going to stop by. And I have several friends that stop by pretty regularly and just come and sit beside my desk and talk to me. And I catch up with their life, and they like to see what I'm working on. So I miss that a lot. I really do.
Right.
Phone calls and Skype are nice, but it's just not the same.
Absolutely. So it sounds like you have kind of a community there within, an arts community where you live or not far from where you live. How is the art market in Waco, Texas? How do you, what is that? What does kind of a year look like for you in terms of how and where you show your work?
The art market in Waco is growing.
Okay.
We have just recently had an art district declared in our downtown. The organization called Creative Waco was very instrumental and essential in having that declaration made by the state, which means they get state funding for art projects in Waco. We have 2 art galleries that are basically fully dedicated to art, and then we have several other places where you can find local art, and we have a list of that, and I'm sure we can make that available on Cultivate 712's website, or I can make it, if somebody wants to email me, I can send them that list. If they're planning to come to Waco to see the silos and Chip and Joanna Gaines, please stop and shop local art.
Tell us about that Chip and Joanna Gaines, because I've heard about that. It's something, there's a big barn where there's a lot of art markets or something like that. Can you tell us a little about that?
The silos. Chip and Joanna Gaines have their show on the Entertainment Network, I think. It was, they've changed from one show to another show, and I'm not up on that. I don't really follow their show, but they are like 3 blocks away from us. And we try to, they have filled Waco with tourists. They have rejuvenated the tourist industry in Waco single-handedly. And we all owe them a debt of gratitude for that, even though we like to complain about our taxes going up.
So has that influx of tourists, has it helped with bringing buyers?
I couldn't say. I'm pretty new to Waco.
Okay.
I've been in Waco 3 years, and I've caught it on the upswing and the growth. I couldn't tell you what it was like before that, but I've been told it was very dismal and that downtown was pretty much a ghost town in Waco. So we have a very vibrant downtown now with lots of things to see and do within walking distance.
That's awesome. Very cool. So I have a couple of people asking for your name. Oh, there it is. Okay. Now we can see it. All right.
Okay.
Great. Perfect. So it's Marsha Wilson for anybody that's wondering. We had a Megan ask, who is this lovely artist? So there we go. Perfect.
Woodburningbymarsha.com.
Okay. Let me put that into the comments right now. So www.woodburning by
Marsha.
Okay. Perfect. All right. So, folks, you can find out more about Marsha's work right there. So you were not originally from Waco. Do you, the folks, Chip and Joanna, were they originally from Waco themselves? Is that why they picked this area to rejuvenate?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so. I'm not really all that up on their particular story, but I'm pretty sure that she was at least very local. If not grew up here, she went to school here.
Very cool. So what would you say that art gives you in terms of, emotionally, or, do you think it gives you vulnerability? Does it give you strength? What is the connection that you feel when you create artwork?
Art gives me a sense of wonder. Art helps me look around and see things that I wouldn't normally see. The texture of brick, the feel of terracotta, the way the sunlight plays and the shadows play. Those are the things that I love to look at, and that's what I love to reflect in my art. I had one lady ask me, well, you don't make up anything out of your head? And I said, well, when I stop seeing wonderful things that are already here, and then I'll start making them up out of my head.
Beautiful. And what do you hope that the viewer takes away when they experience your work?
That same sense of awe-inspiring beauty is what I try to instill in my art. I try to brighten people's lives with art. I'm not trying to send a political message. I'm not trying to send any particular message other than let's look at this wonderful site and get a little bit nostalgic about what things have been or could be again.
So you talk about nostalgia. Was there anything that you, perhaps from your childhood, that you certainly, I guess not in terms of the content of your work, but is there anything that you reflect on in your childhood that you can kind of take emotionally into your work? Is there anything that stands out for you? Any stories?
I had a wonderful childhood growing up. I had a very stable home life. My father went to work every day and my mother stayed home and cooked. And I thought everybody grew up that way, and unfortunately they did not. But I would love to be able to take all of those memories of playing in the trees and fishing in the creek and wading and running around in the yard and playing in the hay barn. I would love to be able to take all of those memories and just instill them in other people's minds.
It sounds like a beautiful childhood.
It was a lot of fun.
So
I had 2 older sisters, and we got into a lot of fun and not much trouble. So,
right. So you mentioned that your mother was a crafter. Now, was your father a creative person?
My father was a very handy man around the house. He raised cattle, and then when he sold off the cattle, he started raising hay and baling hay. And he was always fixing something, changing the oil or fixing his tractor or building a barn. And then he started working on guns and refurbishing guns and building guns and modifying guns. And he taught me how to reload shells. And I loved how he could work with the wood on the guns.
So that's very telling now, given the type of work that you're creating, that there was obviously
Yes,
some.
I was very excited to take it home and show him what I could do with wood.
What was his reaction?
He found something wrong with the picture.
Oh, no! Oh.
It's very detailed oriented, so he helped. Yeah, that's okay. He liked it though.
That's awesome. My grandfather was he fixed electric milk trucks for a living. So
Okay.
as a child, I was always kind of, you reminded me as you were sharing that story, I was always in his workshop fiddling around with different, screws and bolts and asking different questions. And, I have very fond memories of, being around that, just that the smells of, the tools and just,
Yes.
I think that had an impact on me creatively, that I was allowed to, explore these kind of spaces and look inside the trucks and, just there was no restrictions in what I could get into in those kind of environments. So it was super fun. So how, in terms of growing up, in the way that you did, it sounds like you had a beautiful childhood. Was there, because I hear a lot from artists that they were encouraged or discouraged, should I say, from taking that creative path professionally. Do you feel that you had the support and the championship from your parents and your loved ones to pursue that creative goal? And how important would you say that is for parents to to give their children?
Well, I was a homemaker and a mother first, and so my mother would sit and listen to me talk about all of the things that I was doing, and she understood that this was all in my spare time, and this was not a career thing at all. I am now a grandmother, and this is my second career, to branch out into art and to enter the art world. So it's very important to inspire children and to tell them that they're going to make mistakes and that their first attempts are going to be awful. Don't worry about it. Just keep working on it. I wish somebody had told me that when I tried to draw as a small child, that just because it was ugly and I didn't like it didn't mean I wasn't good at it. Keep trying.
Yep, 100%. And I hear so many, sad stories where, for example, somebody may have even got to the point where they've shown their work and they've had somebody, just one person out of maybe 100 people, give them a not so favorable reaction. And they've just completely abandoned what they're doing. And I think because we do put so much of our heart and our soul into the work that we create, there is this huge vulnerability when we show it. I mean, certainly for me, I'm speaking personally, that folks sometimes don't realize the impact that their words can have. Have you?
Right.
Is there ever been an experience like that? You certainly don't sound like somebody who would let that derail you, but have you ever experienced that?
Oh, certainly, certainly. I've had critics criticize the method. I've had critics who say, you can't. Your art is too real. You need to do abstract. Like the lady that asked me why I didn't make things up out of my head, she was putting that in a negative sense, as if I wasn't creative enough simply because I was using realism. And I get the feeling that realism is not held in high esteem in the artwork at this particular time. All of the emphasis is on abstract, and that's okay. That's not what I want to do. What I want to do is realism, and I get I try to look at the people that appreciate it instead of the people that don't appreciate it. Right. And that's a really hard thing for artists to do. We need people around us who are going to encourage us. And so I try to be one of those that encourages other artists when I find them.
Absolutely. And I 100% agree. I've heard many things in these interviews these last week or so where I'm just staggered at some of the comments that people have received. I forget who it was last week, but somebody said, there was a client in front of their artwork and they said to them, "You're almost there." And you think, how could you possibly have the just think that that's acceptable, That's somebody's hard work, somebody's passion, somebody's dreams that you are crushing with one sentence.
And like you say, it may be 1 out of 100 that says that, but those are the voices that go deepest into our psyche and haunt us in our darkest hours.
Yep.
Yep. I totally relate.
Yep. Yeah. You could have 100 fantastic comments and then one that's, unfortunately, that I think that is just part of our human condition, that we are going to cling on to that and dissect it, and we're going to hear that. But, it's not the reality. It's one person's opinion. And, we could definitely all learn to be a little softer on ourselves, I think, as creatives.
It takes a lot of courage and a lot of energy to step out one more time and to see what happens and to get your artwork out there. I remember the very first time that I was asked to hang my artwork on the wall of a gallery. And it was a local gallery here in Waco. And I didn't know that it was a new gallery, that it was just as young in the art world as I was. I thought it was established, and I thought it was a big deal. And to me, it was a very, very big deal. I was so excited. I actually, when I was getting dressed for that opening night, I locked myself out of my very own bedroom. So there I was, an hour before the show, having to break into my own bedroom door to try to get dressed.
Oh my gosh.
That bedroom door had never locked automatically behind me. And I don't know why it did that night, but it was.
So how did you feel when you actually, that first time? I mean, it sounded like it was something very significant for you. How did you feel to actually stand in front of your work and,
Oh, my heart was pounding. My palms were sweaty. I was stuttering like crazy, and I wanted to hide. And I didn't want people to know it was me, but then I wanted people to know it was me, and I was confused, and it was a great night. Yeah. I don't remember anything I said to anybody.
Sometimes that's the best way, right? It's you're present, you're in the moment, you're not overthinking it. So you won the award for excellence at our, I believe, was it a Dallas show or a Dallas show?
It was a Dallas show. Yes, ma'am.
Well, first of all, congratulations.
Thank you. That was like my first award for an art show.
That's amazing. It sounds like there's been more after that.
A couple more.
Fantastic.
Yes, a couple more.
That's great.
Here local in Texas.
So how did that feel? How did that feel to win that award? I mean, we talk about having the validation of somebody enjoy our work and purchase our work. How did you feel to be highlighted and spotlighted by our jurors?
It's kind of being new to the art world. I didn't realize how important those awards are. I got an award for my art when I was in high school in a little art show, and it was, runner-up or honorable mention. That's what it was. And so it's kind of a confusing thing. I appreciate the award, but I didn't realize what was behind it, if that makes sense. And the more you learn about what's behind the art shows, the more you appreciate the awards.
Yeah. And one of the things that was always very important to us, that was we, as the company, as Conception Arts, that we were not involved in the jurying process, because we did not want to, we want to treat everybody equally. We want everybody to have an equal seat at the table. We don't want to have an influence or, opinion, although we obviously do. It's hard as creative people to not have an opinion on the art that you see, but we didn't want to be involved in the decision making. So it was always important for us to bring in, independent jurors. And, it's been such a well-received thing that, to go into communities such as Dallas or Houston or Austin or wherever we are around the country and have these amazing representatives from the art world that willingly come out and juror these things. And we've had everything from a Harvard educator at one of our Boston shows to museum board members, museum curators, writers. I don't know off the top of my head who the 3 jurors were that night, but I'm sure they were esteemed and established folks from the community. And so that has to be pretty thrilling to learn that and know that, you know, out of 40 folks that were there in a variety of different genres that you were, you know, spotlighted.
It was very, very awarding and humbling. Yes. Yeah. And it gives me the energy to keep going and to keep trying. And that was, I believe that was that was 4 years ago now, that show. And it has been a wonderful ride here in Waco in the art world. And it is extremely fun in a lot of different ways. The shows are, and getting the public to see it and to hear the public's opinion is one of the very best things about showing publicly.
That's awesome. So we have a couple of questions here. So Megan says, I might have missed Marsha saying how she started this type of art. How did she learn this? So just a little recap on that, and perhaps tell us what your early pieces looked like. We talked about, you know, making mistakes in the beginning. So you want to answer that?
Okay. I started out on some cedar planks. I was using a scroll saw to cut crosses out of cedar planks. And I didn't want to paint them, but I wanted to decorate them in some way. And I had a wood burner in the closet. It was actually my husband's wood burner from high school. Then he burned his name on a board, and that's all he ever did with it. And I picked it up and started doodling on those crosses to decorate them. And it just worked. I loved it. I've been challenged by it ever since. How can I make something look even more realistic with such a simple tool? And I have videos on YouTube that I don't do voiceover instruction yet, but I do show how my process works. Wood Burning by Marsha on YouTube. And I also have a Facebook page where they can go and find some of those videos as well. Wood Burning by Marsha on Facebook.
Very cool. So how did they... We talked about making mistakes in the beginning. What were some of the mistakes you made other than, I guess, perhaps singeing some paper?
Burning myself, for one.
Right.
I forget that I'm holding the wood burner and go to adjust my hair and burn myself. The biggest mistake that I have made so far was on a wedding sign. They wanted me to make a 3-foot sign that said Big Blues Bar, and that was going to be across the main part of the sign, and then the back end of a pickup and whiskey barrels sitting in the back end of the pickup. And then in the top corner, they wanted the groom's and bride's name and the date, like a signature in cursive. And I had everything done, and I sent almost everything done, and I sent a progress shot to the customer, and she told me that I had misspelled the bride's name.
Oh no!
It was, in my defense, it was a name with a lot of double consonants, but it was totally my fault. And I left out one of the letters, and so I got a sander, and I thought, well, I'm just going to sand this down so that I can get the burn off and, you know, see what's underneath it. And that didn't work. I just kept sanding and sanding. It was going to make a pit in the wood if I didn't stop sanding. And so I got another board, exactly the same type of wood, and I burned the names on it, and then I scalloped the edge of the board and cut it off and glued it onto the first one.
Wow. Hey, you do what you got to do.
So, being a crafter and making do with what you have instead of going and buying something new, it comes in really, really handy when you make a mistake and you have to redo it.
Yep, absolutely. So I have another question here. Does Marsha do commissions?
I definitely do commissions. I appreciate challenges. If you've got a photograph that you want me to burn onto wood, I'll be happy to talk with you. And I love commissions. Yes.
Awesome. Awesome. Megan, Marsha is so authentic and talented. I am thrilled to know about her.
It was nice to meet you, Megan. Thank you.
That's awesome. And we're going to find a way to connect all our award winners as well, because we have a pretty extensive list now over the last kind of 8 or 9
Very
years.
nice.
So we're hoping to find a way to connect everybody so you can all get to know one another and hopefully inspire each other with the community sense of community.
That would be wonderful.
Absolutely. So what's next for you? What's coming up for you? I have a little visitor here. Hang on one second. Everybody can see what I have right here before he walks across me. This is Shepard. He wants to make a little appearance today, apparently. So what is next for you creatively? And obviously we have this pandemic, but once we're past hopefully this challenging time, what are you hoping to accomplish this year?
Oh, well, different shows coming up that everything is basically in a holding pattern right now with all of the shows that I've looked into. Hopefully when things do start opening up, then the shows will be rescheduled, and there's several going on here at this gallery. Every first Friday we open a new exhibit, and that's a wonderful time for people to come and visit this particular gallery, 712 Gallery at 712 Austin Avenue in Waco. For me personally, I am looking at the possibility of a mural. That's in a holding pattern as well, but there's a possibility of burning something big enough to cover a wall.
Wow. So, that's a project.
It would take a long time.
Well, we wish you the best with it, and we hope that you will come back and share your progress and maybe share some video or photographs with us. We'd be thrilled to share them and spread the word.
That would be wonderful. Yes, ma'am.
Absolutely. All right. Well, let everybody know where they can find you and how they can, commission you if they want to reach out.
Reach out to me on Facebook. That's the easiest way to get a hold of me. Wood Burning by Marsha is my business page. Marsha Wilson is my personal page. I cross-post all kinds of things on those two pages. I'm also, my website is woodburningbymarsha.com, www, of course. And then I also have an Etsy shop where there's several things available, Wood Burning by Marsha on Etsy. And I happily hear from anybody and discuss things and answer as many questions as people have.
Wonderful. It was such a pleasure chatting with you this morning. Marsha Wilson out in Waco, Texas, folks. It was nice to have coffee with you, and we combated our technical difficulties and we made it work. So thank you so much. Thank you so
much, Rachel.
It was a pleasure. And we'll see you again tomorrow for Coffee with Artists. Thank you so much for listening.